how is that sitting together? The fact that still it happens, people are borrowing the money in different ways, but it's useless and not really adding anything.
Yeah, for me, it's quite simple. So in a normal, healthy economy, you cannot lend unless you have a borrower. And the borrower needs your money because he's going to do something productive, let's say, productive of values. And then because he or she creates new value out of these new values, they repay you. They repay you the money, but it's not the money you gave them in the first place. That's really important. The money you lend disappears into the things that they buy to do what they're ever going to do. And if they're successful and they have surplus, then they have a source of money which looks like the money you gave them in the first place, but it isn't. This is really important to see that the money you lent disappears, and God help you, if they're not successful, you'll never see it again. So the money you see is capital they've generated, and they say, okay, I mustn't forget I owe Omri some money. It's not yours, right? They could easily say, oh, yeah, but yeah, let him, let's forget about him. This wouldn't be the first time a lender had never seen his money back again. So it relies entirely on the person who borrowed it being able to create fresh capital and honoring the debt he has to you. But no way is this your money coming back to you. This is absolutely not the case. So we have to become clear in how lending takes place, what's really happening. It's not gone in a drawer waiting for you to come back for it. It's not, So if we're clear about that, obviously you cannot have a lender without a borrower. And the argument always is in economics, the argument for store of value is that savings is investment. This is just a standard piece. This is another trope in economics. Why do we need to save? Because the money you save in the bank is lent out by the banks to industry. Nice story, right? So, if you want to see the total sum of savings, it is the total sum of money invested in industry, which possibly was the case when we started thinking like this in industrial Victorian England, where we had to get capital by getting people to save. It's understandable at that point in time. That isn't where we are today. If you want to follow that story, you have to say, well, there's savings, there's super savings, and there's hyper savings. If you want to stay with the notion of savings. So savings is matched by the money we've got invested in industry, if you want to play that game. Super savings is something else. It's like infrastructure for an opera house, or the universities are owned by property companies. And hyper savings is the money you just give to the students, except you don't. The days of giving money to students are over, because in order to keep this nice little story going, when I've got money to lend, but there's no borrower of it, I can only keep the story going if I invent the borrower. That means I have to create financial markets in the abstract. And what is it when a student, what was funded by giving excess capital to students to go to university, why did they suddenly have to borrow this money to go to university? It's because that was fulfilling this financial market I've created. And you look around the insurance market, you look all over the world, when the natural, or let's say healthy relation of lending and borrowing is no longer the only thing in town, but you want to keep to this trope that savings equals investment, right? When in fact it's not true. Then you either say, okay, the match for super savings, okay, the opera house that you own, but you're not going to use, as opposed to the building you own and you are going to use. So you can start to kind of make a more sophisticated portfolio. So this house is mine, I'm going to rent it out. This house is mine, but I'm going to rent it to a kindergarten for nothing. You can make an image of this. And then you come up, so these savings is the money I've saved with my grandson so he can go to university later. Whatever you do, you just elaborate this simple trope of, from a particular point in time, a particular circumstance. You just, if you want to keep the trope, you have to go with the times and then match, what is this matching to this? And you can build it up. And now if you're insisting at this point, this money has to be lent and not given, now you're going to have to create a financial market. into which you lend this money so it can be borrowed by your grandson. And this is the origin of so many financial markets. They're there in order to keep alive the idea that what I've lent on this side of the economy is over here somewhere. But this is a complete fiction. And what this then does, if you borrow money from this market when you should have been given it, you have a cost which you will never recuperate. And you can just look around systematically. What hospital, what university, what is not being thrown to the markets? Where is there not, when you go to a very famous example, Dubai, early in 2008, it was the very famous case. Dubai was this great place of just, I don't know, it's just crazy. All this excess capital just gets turned into huge, ridiculous real estate propositions. And people ask, why do you build a skyscraper with nobody in it? There was a very famous case of this in London, Centre Point. This guy built this huge skyscraper in the middle of London, and he didn't lease it for 30, 40 years. And he said, that's not the point. I didn't build it for anyone to use it. I built it to borrow against. That's why I built it. It's just a financial market.
Wow.
So now I've got this building, because you all believe it has a lot of value because it's in the middle of London. I can borrow tons of money against this building. I don't want anybody in it, because that will bring the value down and I can't borrow so much. So this is weird stuff. But if you go to Dubai, there's this famous case. Someone had built this huge skyscraper and nobody was in it. He hadn't rented it. And it was opened by a big noisy event in which Kylie Minogue came. And if I've got my facts right, she was paid $17 million to sing that night. This is ludicrous. There were no tenants. And then the crash came. And then the guy in New York called up his lawyer and said, get my money out of Dubai. And she said, what money in Dubai? Well, the apartment I bought in that tower block. What apartment? Well, I gave you X million. Yeah, but I don't have a lease. So he had parted with a huge amount of money for which he had no documentation. I think this is a true story, because the market was so fake. You don't actually try and make it precise, because then the whole thing would come down like a pack of cards. And one shouldn't kind of estimate if there's so much capital in the world that needs to be given away or needs to be used to rebalance the economy, and it's not, it will ineluctably start to lend itself back into this imbalance and just make it worse. And so you come to this strange story that to keep this simple Victorian industrial, I know where it all came from, how you finance industry in the middle Victorian era. I know where it all came from. But to make that a permanent circumstance in history and ubiquitous, everything is, it's just crazy. So if you can't elaborate it, you will end up in creating a borrower which doesn't really exist. But then that's all right, as long as you don't borrow any money from it. But once you borrow money from it, now you have a problem, which is just the same as buying land. You bought a dud. You bought something which you haven't bought anything. You've just made yourself more and more bankrupt, because you're buying up more and more stuff and you get nothing for it. So I think this is how it is. And if we get to this sense, between revenue and capital, we need to keep the balance. That requires an amount of capital is constantly going back somehow into the system, you might say. I'm not going to say how at the moment, just back into, I transfer it to someone else and he's going to have to deal with this problem on this side.
Yeah.
Not for me to say, I'm out of that, I've transferred the money. But if all this balancing money refuses to be balancing money and just says, you can have me at 5%, that's not the notion of it. The notion, and when I get given a gift, that is straight on my capital account. There's my capital and there's no liability against it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the accounting nature of a gift. So it's a huge freebie for me. But the financial markets, if I have to pay 5% on what you gave me, right, I'm already bankrupt. And that's really what the financial markets are. All this balancing money caught in a trope. And This I have no doubt about. And that's why I say, if you added up all the money in the financial markets, it would equal all the capital needed by the world in order to get itself balanced again. This I say without hesitation.
This is why you call it a higher, you place it higher than the other two, because it's a conscious balancing instead of a machine-like kind of thing.
Yeah, and even there's a story behind this. There's a story behind everything I say, but I think the story is important. I don't know if you can say higher. With higher comes, you know, any economist will start go, oh, this is religious stuff coming. This is God coming back in again. So I'm going like this, but I'll tell you a story where this image came from, and it's a very, I think it's an important story that people know. This is my image, but this image came about very particularly in a very particular way when I started my very late doctorate. So I did what's called a vanity doctorate. I didn't start till I was 56 or something like this. So what's the point? The point is you're on a vanity trip. Anyway, I started this doctorate in a provincial university, and it was a total waste of time. I don't know why I was there. The guy didn't understand what I was doing. And what I was trying to do was understand the future of central bank independence. And for some reason, in my university in Kent, I was put in the biology department, and I have no idea why this happened. Anyway, it didn't work out. And so very soon, I contacted a colleague in finance. He was doing a doctorate in Harvard at the time. And the story is, he said, okay, I'm flying to Heathrow. You can have 5 hours with me, but then I'm flying on. So we met in Heathrow. And he went in great detail through my doctoral presentation. He said, okay, you just have to leave that provincial university. It's ridiculous. You have to go either to London School of Economics or to City University in the City of London. Either of these two, and you have to go to the top of the tree, and don't waste your time on anyone less. So I said, okay. So I did. And then a few weeks later, I called him up and I said, hey, I'm in the taxi. I have a problem. I went to the LSE, to the top of the tree, to a director of the Bank of England, and he said, okay, I'll take you on. I'm now going to City University, and I just had my interview there, and this guy is the chief historian of the Bank of England, and he said, okay, I'll take you on. So which of these two top universities, and which of these two top people do I choose? I said, and he said, are you telling me, are you for real? I said, well, you told me to. So if you didn't mean it, and I did it, so now I have a problem. Which of one should I go to? Then he didn't make the decision. So I said, I'm not going to London School of Economics. It's too lefty and it's too Fabian in its reputation. I want to go into the City of London, to the university linked to the Bank of England. And I want to, and this supervisor was a free banker, what's more. So I really want to put myself kind of at the feet, so to speak, with my Steiner stuff in the background, at the feet of a serious player in the world of finance, seriously on the right, free banking, Austrian, all the rest of it, because I want to test my Steiner in a really, really cold environment, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I went there. And then I went, I'm a blagger. I told you at the beginning, I'm a blagger. So I blagged my way into this. And then I had to go to a seminar. I went to this seminar and I had to present. And when I presented, I just thought, earth, swallow me up. Why am I here? I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And I'm in front of these serious players in the City of London, and I haven't the first idea of what I'm into. And here I am. And so it didn't really work, the seminar. And when I left the room, not my direct supervisor, but another supervisor said to me, I suggest you go and read Keynes' Tract on Monetary Reform, and I suggest you start again. So I did. And 3 weeks later, I started again. And now Keynes has this whole story about how do you make economics scientific and deliberate. And he tells in this book, written, as I say, when Steiner's giving his economics, he has this whole story about the monetary authorities are somehow independent or not quite above. They're not the same thing as production and finance. He starts speaking like this. And then in that my supervisor said also, and I wrote a book about the history of the Bank of England. In there, you will find an image which says this, by now that we define the central bank as a private institution in the public sphere whose role is to be above the fray of the markets of goods and the markets of capital. Mm-hmm. That's where my image comes from. Mm-hmm. Keynes' book, Tract on Monetary Reform, very precisely written. How do you get scientific and deliberate, says Keynes. He doesn't make this image, but I make it on his behalf. By understanding that in the economy, you have these players, these markets where things are, the fray means self-interest is working, I get all this, but the central bank has to be above these things, not in the fray, but able to kind of, and any central bank, strictly speaking, it takes all this information from the market and turns it into some sort of image, and out of this image, it suggests what the interest rate should be. So it's not actually in the fray, it's just the fray becoming conscious of itself before you go back in and you start the fight all over again. So I made this image very precisely out of Keynes and out of this very powerful official definition of the central bank that's published in 1994. And I've used it ever since. So that's the origin, and it's never failed me in any discussion, lay or professional, be it in the central bank or be it in a school. This is what should be in every book. And now the point is, and I use a very strange kind of image, that if I didn't have two ears, I wouldn't be able to hear. So this third element is not higher or above, but it's, you know, in this example, I've got two ways I can hear. This is a bit crazy, but you'll find if you look at any ears, they're not identical. And through this, I can hear. If you were to ask Steiner what that's all about, thanks to two ears and your ability to hear, you know you're on the planet. So this unit of account function is not quite what it seems, or it's not quite what is described as being. It's not a unit of account at all. It's a means of perception. And now you're in a whole different world. Now the economist has at his disposal, at her disposal, an actual means of perception, which is knowing how to balance between two different things. And now, as an economist, you can do what economics claims to do. Now you can see the future, not predict it. Now you can see what's coming down the road towards you, because the unit of account has become a means of seeing, not a projecting your assumptions, but just a means of seeing. And you get there like you would with any two things. Two eyes, I can see. Now you have an instrument where you can become conscious via your twin organs, so to speak. I won't stretch the analogy, but I think it's very important, at least in my understanding of Steiner. This is how you know you're a human being. So the power of hearing, or the faculty of hearing, thanks to having two ears in a normal, you know, ceteris paribus.
Yeah.
And so this image it doesn't seem to be saying anything, except it's saying a huge amount. And when you can start to say, and I will do it later, but I can make one of these columns, I think I want to make it this one, because it's on the left as you look at it. Mm-hmm. If you say, okay, this column at this point of the discussion, this is spending, this is means of exchange, this is lending, store of value, this is giving and unit of account. Now I've changed your whole understanding of economic and financial life. And I later on I will write those on here, because I have no doubt these are three functions and they're referring to two very different things. Spending is not the same as lending, and giving is not the same as those. It's a higher order in the sense it will balance between them. It exists through the other two, if you see what I mean. This is axiomatic. And I would say unequivocally, if you want to create a heuristic device for the so-called threefold nature of society, this is it. It is not three separate circles overlapping, which is what most people use in the Steiner movement. This is, you know, this is a Venn diagram or something like this. This is absolutely not the image of what Steiner's talking about. You use this in constitutional discussion of the three powers and all the rest of it, but you only get it clear in a constitutional monarchy when these three circles do not overlap. They're held together by the monarch not being able to comment on his minister's behavior. So in the whole threefold movement world that a lot of Steiner people are into, if they use this image, then I know that what they're talking about. If they use three overlapping circles in any particular relationship, right? This is not it. It doesn't explain anything. And so you can explain, we'll come to it eventually. This image won't change as I go into what Steiner understands about money. But I've gone all this way and I haven't referred to Steiner yet. For me, this is really important because then you can say, so what is he saying that we don't already know or we can't already figure out with our normal understanding of money and our normal consciousness?